Imagine you're cruising at 35,000 feet when suddenly both engines go silent. The hum that's been with you since takeoff just stops. What happens next might surprise you because it's not what most people think. The plane doesn't drop from the sky like a stone. In fact, something much more controlled and frankly remarkable happens instead. This is one of those scenarios that keeps nervous flyers awake at night. But the reality is far less terrifying than the nightmare. Understanding what actually happens when a plane loses both engines, how pilots are trained for this exact moment, and why modern aircraft are designed to handle it, might just change how you feel about flying forever. First, let's address the biggest myth. Planes don't need engines to fly. That probably sounds wrong, but it's absolutely true. Engines provide thrust to move the plane forward and maintain altitude, but the actual flying, the staying in the air part, comes from the wings. As long as air is moving over those wings, the plane generates lift. When engines fail, the aircraft doesn't fall. It glides. Think of it like riding a bicycle down a hill. You stop pedaling, but you don't immediately tip over. You keep rolling forward because you have momentum, and as long as you're moving, the bike stays balanced and stable. A plane works similarly. Without engines, it becomes a glider, and modern commercial aircraft are surprisingly good gliders. A typical passenger jet can glide about 2 miles forward for every 1,000 feet it descends. So if both engines quit at a cruising altitude of 35,000 feet, the plane could potentially glide for roughly 70 miles. That's not a short distance. That's enough to give pilots real options, real time to make decisions. The plane descends gradually, not catastrophically, giving everyone on board a window of opportunity that's much larger than most people realize. But let's walk through what actually happens in those first critical moments. When both engines fail, pilots immediately hear warnings. Alarms sound, lights flash on the instrument panel, and the flight deck gets loud. But here's what matters. Pilots train for this exact scenario over and over in simulators. It's drilled into them until their response becomes automatic. Their first job is to fly the plane. Everything else is secondary. The captain or first officer will immediately push the nose down slightly to maintain airspeed. This seems counterintuitive. You're falling, and the pilot points the nose down. But this is crucial. The plane needs to keep moving fast enough for the wings to generate lift. Too slow, and the plane could stall, which actually would cause it to drop. By maintaining the right speed, the aircraft stays controllable and predictable. It becomes a very large, very heavy glider, but a glider nonetheless. While one pilot is flying, the other is running through the engine restart checklist. Engine failures are almost never permanent. Sometimes it's a fuel system problem. Sometimes it's ice in the fuel lines. Sometimes it's something mechanical that can be fixed or worked around. Pilots will attempt to restart the engines multiple times using different procedures, and often they succeed. But even if they can't, the plane is still flyable. Now here's where things get interesting from an engineering perspective. Modern planes have backup systems for their backup systems. When engines fail, you lose more than just thrust. The engines power the hydraulic systems that move the flight controls, and they generate electricity for all the instruments and computers. Losing engines means losing those systems too, unless the plane has another plan. And it does. It's called a ram air turbine. or RAT for short. Within seconds of losing both engines, a small turbine drops out from under the plane into the airstream. The wind spinning past the aircraft turns this little turbine, and that generates enough electrical power and hydraulic pressure to keep the essential systems running. Flight controls still work. Instruments stay lit. Radios keep functioning. The plane doesn't go dark. Think of the RAT like a small emergency generator. It won't power everything, but it powers what matters. It's elegantly simple, completely mechanical, and remarkably reliable. The wind does the work. As long as the plane is moving through the air, which it will be all the way to the ground, the RAT keeps things running. Meanwhile, pilots are making one of the most important decisions they'll ever make: where to land. This isn't a guessing game. Every commercial flight has alternate airports planned before takeoff, but now pilots need somewhere reachable within their glide range. They're looking at their instruments, calculating descent rates, checking winds, and considering every possible option. Can they make it back to the airport they just left? Is there another airport ahead within range? If airports aren't an option, what else is available? This is where training and experience become everything. Pilots are taught to prioritize surfaces that are long, flat, and free of obstacles. Highways, beaches, open fields, and yes, even rivers become potential landing sites. The goal is controlled contact with the ground at the slowest safe speed, in a place where the plane won't hit buildings, trees, or people. One of the most famous examples of this happened in January 2009 over New York City. U.S. Airways Flight 1549 took off from LaGuardia Airport and almost immediately struck a flock of geese. Both engines ingested birds and failed. The captain, Chesley Sullenberger, had seconds to decide what to do. Going back to LaGuardia wasn't possible. The nearest airport in New Jersey wasn't reachable either. He had one option: the Hudson River. He glided the Airbus A320 down over the city, lined up with the river, and put the plane down on the water as gently as possible. All 155 people on board survived. It became known as the Miracle on the Hudson, but it wasn't really a miracle. It was training, skill, and the fact that the plane remained flyable even without engines. Sullenberger had about 3.5 minutes from engine failure to touchdown. In that time, he assessed his options, made a decision, communicated with air traffic control, prepared the cabin crew, and executed a water landing. The aircraft did exactly what it was designed to do. Stories like this are extraordinary, not because they happen often, but because they happen so rarely and still end safely. Dual engine failures on commercial jets are almost unheard of. Engines are absurdly reliable. They're tested beyond anything they'll experience in normal flight. They're maintained obsessively, and planes always have at least 2 of them, sometimes 4, specifically so that losing one isn't a crisis. The odds of both engines failing simultaneously due to mechanical problems are astronomically low. When dual-engine failures do happen, it's almost always something external. Bird strikes, like in the Hudson River incident. Volcanic ash, which can choke engines if a plane flies through it. Fuel exhaustion, which is entirely preventable and the result of human error, not mechanical failure. These scenarios are so rare that most pilots will fly entire careers without experiencing a single engine failure, let alone 2. And even when it does happen, the plane doesn't become a brick. It becomes a glider with backup power, fully functional flight controls, and 2 highly trained pilots who have practiced this exact emergency dozens of times. Aviation is built on layers of redundancy. If one system fails, another takes over. If one option closes, another opens. The entire design philosophy of modern aircraft is that no single failure should be catastrophic. Here's what that means for you as a passenger. The engines on your flight are statistically more reliable than almost any machine you interact with daily. They're monitored in real time by computers that detect problems before they become failures. They're inspected on schedules so strict that parts are replaced based on flight hours, not because they're broken. And if, against all odds, something does go wrong, the plane is designed to keep flying. The pilots are trained to handle it, and the outcome is far more likely to be safe than not. Flying is the safest form of long-distance travel humans have ever invented. That's not an exaggeration. It's not marketing, it's statistics. Millions of flights happen every year, carrying billions of passengers, and the vast majority land exactly as planned, on time, on the runway, with everyone walking off without a second thought. So the next time you're on a plane and you hear the engines humming along, remember this. Those engines are incredibly reliable, but even if they weren't, even if both went silent tomorrow, you'd still be in one of the most survivable situations in all of aviation. The plane would glide, the backup systems would kick in, the pilots would take control, and the story would almost certainly end with everyone safe on the ground. Because that's how aviation works. That's how it's designed. And that's why, despite what our fears might tell us, there's no safer way to cross the sky.